Happy Monday, everyone. This is Martha with Nature Niche, and this week I want to talk to you about three very common milkweeds in Michigan for monarchs. Monarchs for sure have been getting a lot more press lately, especially since the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, announced on July 21st that they were adding monarchs as endangered to their red list of threatened species. And I just think it's important to note that that does not change monarch status here in the United States. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service did decide back in December of 2020 that adding monarch to the list of threatened and endangered species under the Endangered Species Act was warranted, but it was precluded by higher priority species really needing to be listed sooner than that. So for the details on that, you can go back to Mondays with Martha number 31. Monarch is still a candidate species for federal listing, and its status will be reviewed each year. It gives us more time to be able to create and sustain habitats for this once very common butterfly species. And it will give us time to find a way to support its migration in North America. And one of the ways we can do that is by providing both host plants and nectar species in our landscapes. So today I want to focus on the three most common native milkweed species you'll find in Michigan. There are 11 native species in the state total and close to 100 species across North America. So I figured focusing on the three most common would be helpful so you can find them and conserve them in your landscape or consider adding them because they are a required host plant for monarchs to lay their eggs on and for their caterpillars to feed on. So let's talk about milkweed ID and what site preferences you need to know about these species. Most milkweeds have a milky sap, and this is their defense against herbivory. You want to keep that substance out of your eyes and off your skin as much as you can. They also tend to have opposite leaves. Rarely, certain species have alternate or whorled leaves, but they're sort of the exception to the rule. Most have opposite leaves. They have a unique pattern of flower parts and how those are arranged. So there's a ring of hoods with beaks sticking out, and that is called the corona. I think it looks like a crown. And then there's a ring of 5 petals that tend to be reflexed or bent backwards, with 5 sepals, which are little petal-like leaf structures beneath the flower. The fruit is an elongated follicle, generally called pods, and they're filled with flat seeds with silky tufts of hair that help with wind dispersal. Common milkweed, Asclepius syriaca, is a species of various habitats and by far our most common milkweed here in Michigan. You can find it on disturbed sunny sites, along ditches and roadsides and railroad rights-of-way, upland fields, woodland margins, dunes, lake shores, openings in aspen and pine savannas, and prairies. And it likes dry to somewhat moist soils and usually sandy to sandy loam, but you can also find it and grow it in loam and more clay soils as well. This 2 to 6 foot tall perennial has a glabrous to downy stem with opposite large broad leaves that are up to 8 inches long by 3.5 inches wide, with a lower surface that's covered in woolly hairs. The flowers are pale pink to violet. Rarely they can be creamy white. They're wonderfully fragrant and occur in these very spherical umbels. The pods are warty and covered in woolly hairs. And when it's happy, this plant will readily spread by underground rhizomes to form pretty large colonies. So I would put this species somewhere where you can allow it to spread and naturalize and really provide both as a great host plant for monarch as well as a nectar species. Swamp milkweed, Asclepius incarnata, is Michigan's only milkweed of truly wet places, and it can grow where there's several centimeters of standing water present. So you'll find this species at the edges of rivers and streams, along shores, in wet prairies, openings in conifer swamps, fens, um, open depressions in forests, swales, ditches, and wet meadows. It likes full sun to part shade, in mesic or average moisture to wet soils, including mucky clay, rich loams, silts, all soils with high organic matter content, often because of the amount of water present and slower decomposition. This 3 to 4 foot tall perennial has narrower opposite leaves, up to 6 inches long by 1.5 inches across, but they're more usually about 3 inches long, 1.5 inches wide. They are glabrous, meaning they have no hair. The flowers are very showy, a bright hot pink in color, and also fragrant. They occur in rounded but not the spherical umbels of common milkweed. The pods are smooth and glabrous. So this plant is a little bit easier to keep in place and more shade tolerant than most of our milkweed species. Exception would be poke milkweed, Asclepius exaltata, which is truly a forest understory species. Swamp milkweed may be found as a single plant, or it can spread by rhizomes to form loose colonies. But in general, this is a little more well behaved than how much common milkweed likes to spread. And last but certainly not least is butterfly weed or butterfly milkweed, Asclepius tuberosa. This is a plant of dry open sites, barrens and savannas with oak, sassafras, and pines. It can be found on jack pine plains, sandy roadsides and fields, dry rocky slopes, and it really likes full sun and dry to average soils. It tends to do best on acidic, sandy, or rocky soils, but it can adapt to clay and loam soils as well, as long as they are well drained. This 1 to 3 foot tall perennial has very hairy stems, and it is our only milkless milkweed. So it does not have that milky sap, and its leaves are alternate, not opposite, along the stem. Those leaves are 2.5 to 3.5 inches long by about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch wide. They are glabrous to slightly hairy on top, and below are quite short hairy. The flowers are a brilliant orange color, can be a little more yellow or even bicolored with yellow and orange. They are long lasting but not particularly or noticeably fragrant. And the pods are smooth and short hairy. It does have a deep woody taproot, and it tends to form clumps with multiple sort of lax to upright stems rather than forming colonies. So it is quite well behaved as far as a garden plant goes, staying put where you plant it. So I hope this overview of the 3 most common milkweeds found in Michigan will help you be able to identify them and preserve them in your landscapes. I encourage you to plant more of these species where appropriate. Pick the right plant for the right place. They are excellent, both host plants for monarchs and as nectar sources for the adult monarchs. And this is something pretty straightforward that you can do to help support our monarchs, and it gives you the opportunity to monitor our monarch populations and be a citizen scientist in your own yard. So I'm pulling together some workshops on how we can help monarchs. So be looking for that for my local listeners. Those will be in store. And I'll be doing more Monday posts for sure, outlining ways that we can help our monarch butterflies. I hope you get out and get to enjoy both some milkweeds and the monarchs this week. Take care.